Welcome to the Employee Services Policy Series, Back to Basics. Today's session is to introduce the new and revised Human Capital Framework, formerly known as the Human Capital Assessment and Accountability Framework, and affectionately known as the HCAAF. Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge our online audience, which data indicates is quite a substantial one, and to remind you to submit any questions you may have to either our email box dedicated to this event, one word, swptraining@opm.gov, that is swptraining@opm.gov, or via our Max conduit. You should have that link to the Max site in the reminder email you received just about 20 minutes ago. And we'll do our best to get to as many questions as time allows. So now please enjoy this short introduction video, the Human Capital Framework and you.
You are the engine of one of the most complex organizations in the world. Every day, millions of federal employees provide services, solve problems, manage resources, create and administer policy, and drive world-changing innovations that have global and historical impact. And without you, the U.S. government would grind to a halt. Yours is no easy task in a world of diminishing resources and changing workforce dynamics. We listen to your concerns and are happy to unveil a revitalized human capital framework that has been simplified and streamlined. This new framework resides across 4 strategies: strategic planning and alignment, talent management, performance culture, and evaluation. More importantly, however, is that this new framework reduces the reporting requirements and strives to make data more accessible and relevant to you. Our goal is to work with you to develop a community of practice that exchanges information, knowledge, and best practices. Over the next few weeks, we'll be offering a series of webcasts that preview the refreshed HCF framework and how it works. Join us as we discover the best way to do the work we can only do together.
Thank you, Raphael. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to OPM and the unveiling of our new Human Capital Framework. My name is Sydney Heimbrock, and I'm Deputy Associate Director of OPM's new Center for Strategic Workforce Planning. This center is a newly formed part of Employee Services Division under the leadership of Angela Bailey. And we are responsible within Employee Services for providing forecasting about future trends and scenarios so that we can help people like you position the federal workforce for the future. We are also responsible for enabling innovation in HR policies and practices and designing and supporting strategies such as skills gap closure across the federal government. So first of all, I want to thank all of you who have joined us here in person despite the snow, and all of you who are on the web, as we launch a series of webcasts that are aimed at unveiling and rolling out the new Human Capital Framework by unpacking it for you. We know that at the center of the federal workforce is you, the HR professional, who are responsible for designing and implementing workforce strategies that assure the government has the talent we need and the performance culture that enables the workforce to thrive and to serve. We also know that your job has become very difficult and will continue to be very difficult in a world of diminishing resources, very fast changing workforce dynamics, ever increasing expectations for the federal workforce to serve the American people, and increased competition for the top talent that we need for our nation. So to help you succeed in this ever-changing environment, we have had for a decade the Human Capital Assessment and Accountability Framework. And the HCAAF, as we know it, outlines a strategic approach to human capital management you just heard about on the video. The HCAAF promotes the ongoing process of human capital management in every federal agency using a traditional system model of planning and goal setting, implementation, and evaluation using strong metrics. We know that this framework has served the HR community very well. We know that across the federal government, we've learned to speak the language of strategic human capital management. But we also know that like any system, it has to be continually evaluated, refined, and adapted to meet our changing environment. So, in celebration of the 10-year anniversary of the HCAAF, which was required by law in 2002 through the Homeland Security Act, we decided to take a fresh look. So we sought out thought leaders and HR practitioners from across government as well as across sectors on how the current strategic human capital framework could be improved. And based on a lot of input, a lot of deliberation, we are very happy to unveil, believe me, we're very happy to unveil the revitalized human capital framework. So you'll notice we no longer call it the HCAAF. You may catch us tripping up a little bit because it's been a decade and we have loved it well, but we are changing the name to the Human Capital Framework. And part of this is to simplify the name and simplify the framework so that it is streamlined and more accessible to you and to the managers and employees that you serve across the federal government. So again, our goal has been to make sure that this framework is consistent, easy to understand, and truly enabling as you strive to make the federal government's workforce management a strategic effort. As I mentioned earlier today, we're kicking off the first in a series of webinars to introduce and familiarize you with the new Human Capital Framework and our new areas of focus. And to start this, we're going to have a panel discussion of federal human capital leaders. Following the panel discussion, we will have our very own Dr. Shelley Thomas with our forecasting and strategy group, who will provide an overview of the new Human Capital Framework and what it means to you. So first, please join me in welcoming the panel members. Angela Bailey, Associate Director of OPM's Employee Services Division. Joseph Kennedy, who has served as the Principal Deputy Associate Director with OPM's Employment Services Division, and I'm very pleased to inform you that he will soon become the Associate Director for HR Solutions here at OPM. And last but definitely not least, and somebody who has really supported OPM's leadership in human capital across the government, Dustin Brown, Deputy Assistant Director for Management at the Office of Management and Budget. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. Hopefully the mic is working. All right, I'm going to start with Joseph, who I have called the father of the HCAAF. So it's only fitting that as we unveil the new Human Capital Framework, he is also moving over to a new role at OPM. So a basic question many of you may have is, why is OPM revitalizing the HCAAF and rolling out a new framework based on the old systems and the old approach to strategic human capital management? In other words, why not just start over?
No, I got a mic. That's a great question. First, I want to address the father of the HCAAF thing. I feel like an old man, I guess, when people say that. I think really the father of the HCAAF probably is a guy by the name of Dave Dye, but Dave may be listening on the web. It's a very interesting question, Sydney. And I think when we started this whole conversation about revising the HCAAF, it was because it was about 8 or 9 years old, and we had seen the field begin to evolve. And so we began to say, well, we know we're missing some things because there are certain analytics and environmental issues that are going on that maybe the HCAAF didn't have the agility to naturally capture. But we got into it, and the framework began to hold. I mean, it began to tell us that there was a reason why it was standing the test of time, but there were 4 issues that I would actually say that we began to say we need to really address. The HCAAF in itself was beginning to create what I call a siloed dialogue. And that whole dialogue was beginning that the only folks that were talking about the HCAAF were human capital people. And the issue of human capital management is not just a human capital professionals question. It is a program manager's question. It's a human capital professionals question. It is also a performance improvement officer question. And so we had to begin to say, look at the framework to open it up so it began to speak to more audiences than just the human capital audience. The other thing was just hard to digest. I mean, you would sit in a meeting with somebody and you say, yeah, you know the HCAAF, and everybody shake their head, yeah, I know the HCAAF, and nobody knew the HCAAF. I mean, it was just a hard thing to digest. Philosophically, wonderful document, pragmatically and practically, hard to digest. The other piece that it was, though, is that, again, we talked about the agility. You know, you look at what was going on in the environment, what was going on in influencing and budget, things that you talked about in your opening remarks, and we began to wonder, did the framework really have the agility to take care of business? And then the last thing that we looked at is that you had 2 powerful things going on, the CHICO Act and GEPRA. And was the HCAAF really leveraging those to the best of care and to make certain that organizational performance was really the key, and not just strategic human capital management leading without having an organizational consequence. And so we wanted to make certain. So those were really the kind of key things that were on the minds of us as we were beginning to think about, you know, going into the HCAAF. So I hope that answers your question.
It absolutely does. And I think there's a really immediate and strong follow-up question that may be in the minds of many HR professionals working across the federal environment. And it's a great question for Angela Bailey. And that is that in the world of diminishing resources and increased pace and increased expectations, why not just focus on getting the job done? Do we really have time for this strategic stuff when we're under pressure to just do the minimum to get by so that we can get people in the door, get them managed, and help them transition as they move on? So how do we focus in our current environment and foreseeable environment? How do we focus on strategy when we're so overwhelmed with operations?
That is a good question, Sydney, and I would say that often I think that in practice that it is kind of difficult, but it's something that we absolutely must do. So if we don't have a strategy and we don't have a framework for what we want to do, and we don't even have a vision of where we want to go, then actually what we end up doing too often is we're just hiring people for the sake of hiring people. We're not necessarily thinking about the right skills that we need, whether it's for today or into the future, in particular into the future. And so when we don't sit down and think through where exactly we want to take the organization, again, we just end up, we just make meaningless hires. And I think too often these hires are not only expensive, they're expensive from the standpoint of recruiting can get expensive. When you hire the wrong type of skill, not so much the wrong person, but the wrong skills into a job, then you spend the first whole year just wondering, hitting your head saying, what the heck did I do? And then you're trying to, work to either place that person somewhere else so that you can start the process all over again. And so I think that while it's incredibly important that we spend time on, yes, absolutely improving the operations for HR, if we don't, in concert with management, have a plan or a vision and a strategy of where we want to go, then all the operations in the world just will be for nothing.
I'm glad that's the answer. Because, is this working? Okay, great. Because I think in part that's the mission of the center that my group has just stood up under Angie's leadership, is specifically to look at what is coming at us in the future and how do we use HR management and HR operations to reshape and to make a more agile service for the American people. So as we are rolling out the framework, you will see when we present it to you that we have really striven to create an approach that works at 3 different levels within the agency. And these are levels that as HR professionals we navigate all the time. So at the strategic level, we have agency leadership. These are the people who will be worried about their GIPRA goals, worried about budgeting, worried about how to get the job done, and trying to figure out how you fit this whole HR thing into that picture. At the second level, we have operations. So these are the hiring managers, program managers, and us, HR practitioners, who have to just get the job done. And then finally, who it's all about is the employee. And these are the people who are out there serving the American people, making things happen, and whom we have to enable and support. So at these 3 levels, and this question goes to Dustin, how do you think that thinking in terms of 3 levels, how will this help agencies implement their goals and their initiatives?
Thanks for the question. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I mean, I really do want to commend OPM and Angie, Joseph, Sydney, in particular for their leadership and really kind of taking a step out and really rethinking their core business and trying to align it to some of the things that are going on in agencies and government-wide. I really think this offers a tremendous opportunity to kind of take the next step in this area. You know, when Jeff Zients first came to OMB, he gave us some very good direction about, you know, whatever framework you put in place, make sure it's used and useful. And that really has been the guiding principle. And I think that's exactly the approach that is done here. And I think one of the most practical ways to ensure a framework is actually used and useful is to make sure people see themselves in it. And that it's very clear to them what their roles and responsibilities are within the broader framework. And I think that's what this achieves. And the 3 levels that you just mentioned, I think, speak very clearly to the actual job responsibilities that people have, whether it's the agency head or the deputy secretary or an HR professional or a program manager, and it calls that out very specifically. And I think that's important because at the end of the day, one of the most important factors in our success is whether we really do have that alignment. Joseph mentioned the GIPRA Modernization Act, which is what we work on with our agency performance improvement officers. And one of the primary things that act did a couple of years ago that the president signed is clarify the roles and responsibilities of everyone from the president, who's responsible for setting cross-agency priority goals, to agency heads who set strategic goals and their priority goals every couple of years, to chief operating officers responsible for regular data-driven reviews, at least quarterly, which is a key focal point of the HCAAF as well, to performance improvement officers, even to a new concept of goal leaders. And that's the way we like to talk about what that act did. And I think the HCAAF marries with that approach very nicely. And we're not just doing it in kind of, won't this look neat on a piece of paper or diagram, but we're actually doing it in very real ways. I think the HR stat effort that OPM and OMB have championed along with our performance improvement officer community and our CHICO community is a perfect example of making sure that the CHICO is at the table during those data-driven DEPSEC or Chief Operating Officer reviews, and then now CHICOs are running their own data-driven reviews following on that. And what we're seeing from that, I think, is really an extraordinary amount of accomplishments that haven't happened traditionally, whether it's 55% reduction in crime in 4 Native American reservations that Interior's achieved over the last few years, or 17% reduction in cigarette consumption that HHS is working toward, or reducing the number of homeless veterans substantially toward a goal of ending it in 5 years that VA and HUD are joining up on. You're seeing kind of the right actors coming around the table with leadership engaged in improving implementation. And I really think that's exactly aligns with the HCAAF vision of getting that alignment from the leadership to the operations to the support and other groups. When you bring that into alignment, big things are possible in the federal space, and I think we're seeing lots of examples of that across, and we're looking forward to having many more in the future.
Much, Dustin. So as you've heard then, what we're about here is everything from strategic vision and focus, goal setting at the highest levels of government, achieving outcomes for the American people, and doing that through the federal workforce and through the best management of the federal workforce that we can provide as HR professionals. So with that prompting comment, As the three of you go out to federal leadership, agency stakeholders, and non-governmental observers, what will you say about the new human capital framework? What is new about the HCF?
I think, again, Dustin sort of hit it on the head. I think that the number one new is the connectivity to organizational performance, and the ability and the agility of a framework to say, we've got different types of people coming into an organization. We've got young, we've got experienced, we've got different challenges as far as budgetary challenges, we've got environmental issues. But the objective of a framework is really to make certain that you can be in the big dance. It's not about making certain that you're in the small dance. If there are things going on in this country that deal with, the ability to get people back to work, then what does the human capital framework help an organization and those organizations involved with saying, how do I put people back to work? How do I support the recovery of this country? How do I make certain that if there is an earthquake some particular place, that the skill sets that we need map to where we need to go to be successful? So I think that's what is about the agility in the system. But when I go out, if I were to go out, and I will be going out to see a lot of you in my new role, but if I were to go out and talk to folks, I would just tell folks it is a framework. Frameworks do not do anything on their own. They don't. And if people do not make an investment in strategic human capital management, it doesn't matter. Agencies have to get prepared from a readiness standpoint. They have to have the governance in place to make certain that they can implement, strategic alignment and talent management and looking at their cultures. They have to be ready, and they have to make that investment. And I know when people are looking at the economics and saying, wow, can I still do that? Can I still do that? My challenge to agencies is this: you cannot afford to. You have to do it. You have to make those calls, because as we begin to shrink, we need to be thinking about talent management and succession management and better workforce planning analytics. Those are the kinds of things that we've got to make certain that we're moving out on. Otherwise, we'll be looking at the government and asking ourselves 5 or 10 years down the line, why didn't we think through this a little bit better? And the reality is the HCAAF will help organizations think through those decisions a lot better.
Yeah, I completely agree. And with the framework, I think the really nice thing, or the message that I would deliver, is that we need to really stop thinking of things as being human capital over here and mission over here. And so the whole idea of the human capital framework is that there has to be a marriage between those two, and the mission is absolutely, it has to come first, but it cannot get done if we do not put the effort into making sure that we have the right strategies in place for how we're going to accomplish that mission. And when we think of a human capital framework, it can be what we often call the total force. So it doesn't have to always be this view that it's just the federal employees. It's what is the contractor support that needs to go to this. For DOD, what is the military contractor and the civilian workforce that needs to be applied to this? Is it a temporary project-based, or is it a permanent-based? Is it something that we can grow from the bottom up, or is it something we've got to bring in experts and consultants because, it's a very short-term thing, and this is what we need to dedicate our time and energy to? So the framework is designed in such a way as to really start the conversation between the human resource professionals and the line managers or the agency leadership, to say that we absolutely have to look at this as being one consolidated effort in order to achieve the mission.
Yeah, I'd echo all of those points, and I think if there's one way to really sum up, I think for a lot of years, whether it's the GIPRA, whether it's the HCAAF or other strategies, they've largely operated from a theory that the more information we kind of put out there and the more pages that we write in our plans and reports, the better off we're going to be. And I think what we're kind of coming to a realization of is that's not sufficient anymore, and that the use proposition is the most important one that we have to be able to clarify for everybody involved. And I think one of the real powerful opportunities that exist now that didn't exist maybe several years back is the amount of data and information that is available, and the ability to really organize that in very compelling ways that start that conversation that Angie was just mentioning. In particular, one of the most powerful things that comes to mind is the energy that OPM has put into revitalizing the employee viewpoint survey and getting breakouts down to kind of almost the managerial level for many agencies. And I think what a perfect example of a tool that OPM is working with agencies to make available that really can begin that conversation in a very productive way, that bring the mission focus with the personnel focus together, and have a dialogue around really how are we doing it, meet our organizational goals, and what are the human capital, HR, and other issues that need to be addressed in order to make sure we really are fulfilling our mission. So I think it's a kind of a combination of those different sorts of things that OPM and is working with other agencies to make sure is brought together to really have a holistic view of the organizational performance at the end of the day, which is what we're all held accountable for and striving to improve each and every year.
Great, thank you. Thanks to all of our panelists. And I want to emphasize a point that I think Joseph brought up earlier, which is the goal for us in revitalizing the HCAAF has been to make it agile, to make it adaptive in the complex environment that we live in today and in the foreseeable future. And so what you're going to hear is a lot of presentation of what we have come up with. But as Joseph also said, the framework is no good if you don't actualize it. And we're really looking to you, the HR professionals across government, to partner with us to make this useful for you at those three levels: strategic, operational, and employee. And so we're going to be literally crowdsourcing a lot of the tools and support items that we plan to roll out to help you as you implement the new human capital framework. So please join us, get involved, let us know what you think, let us know what you need, because we are here to support you so that you can support your agency managers, leaders, and employees. So with that, I think we're going to actually now find out what it is that we've been talking about. What is this human capital framework? And Dr. Shelley Thomas will come up to the podium. And again, thank you to our panelists, and we look forward to working with you over the coming months and years.
Thank you, panel. And I'm actually going to be a voice in the ether down here with the slides. So as the panels leave, the panel personnel leaves, we'll do a little shifting down here, and we'll ask that the camera focus in on the briefing slides. This is going to be fun because we've been doing a lot of work, and a lot of you out in the audience have been part of the hard work of putting together a new framework. And actually today is like a sneak peek or a premiere. You're going to see the very basic framework presented today, and then over a series of meetings in the next few weeks, we'll go into great detail about each system and the supporting documents and tools that we're putting together with your help. And we'll talk about how these systems relate to each other. But today, this is primarily an introduction. And the title of our session is A Revitalized HCAAF, and by the end of the session, it will be the Human Capital Framework. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to touch on just a little history, because what we're about now is the future. We'll talk a little bit about the objective of the revitalization project, and then we'll touch on what Sydney talked about in terms of all the data gathering we did, in terms of what needs to change with the current HCAAF. We'll talk then about key changes to the framework, and then we'll look at the framework as a whole, the three perspectives, the 4 new systems, and the new focus areas. And then I'll spend maybe a half a second talking about our next sessions. A tad bit of history here. The HCAAF was developed to help define the strategic human capital management position within the federal government. And at the time it was developed, this really was quite spectacular, quite new. And by law, the HCAAF provides a set of systems, standards, and metrics that agencies use to assess how well their human capital is being managed. And in turn, OPM then used a scoring process to assess how well they were managing their human capital. So the HCAAF of the past was really associated with more of a strong assessment or scoring process. As Joseph mentioned, we knew that we needed to do some new things with this framework. We had heard from you in a very informal way, in a casual way, that the HCAAF needed some improvement in some areas, and so we set about to do this in a very systematic way. The objective of the revitalization project was to use, and I'm going to read this for you, a data-driven approach to make human capital framework flexible, practical, and easier to use for leadership, employees, line managers, human capital HR practitioners, so that programs have efficient and effective outcomes. Now, that's a lot of words. So what I decided to do was put the important ones in blue. So as we go through this presentation, I want you to think back to the words in blue because we'll really be emphasizing those concepts. But first, what happened when we went out and collected data? I want to mention to you that we'll be putting several documents on Max, and I'll have that Max site for you at the end of the presentation. But we collected a tremendous amount of data through interviews and questionnaires, and we have a really nice research document that we'll post on Max that will tell you exactly how many managers we interviewed, how many we surveyed, and what the findings were in detail. But essentially, what happened was we had HR directors throughout the federal government complete a questionnaire about the current HCAAF and asked for opinions about enhancements. Then the HR directors forwarded the questionnaire to multiple HR professionals and to federal government colleagues who were executives and program managers. We then had a sample of HR professionals and line managers interviewed on these same questions. And then third, we conducted a roundtable discussion, and this was really a neat happening. We had people from private industry, people from the academic world, and all around the federal government sit with us for a full 7.5 hours to talk about human capital and strategy. We also had a literature review that was done that looked at what are the relevant human capital management issues according to the academics, and what kind of context do we need to understand as we move forward in terms of developing this framework. And what we have there is up on the screen now are the results of all the data gathering. And we decided that, you know, a good framework must have the following. I won't read all of those, but I'm going to highlight some of the ones that I think are the most important. One of the things we learned, as Sydney mentioned earlier, was that the HCAAF really has been an effective framework that describes the management of human capital. And they wanted it to continue to be described in the holistic way that the HCAAF attempts to drive. But clearly there was a need to link human capital more to mission accomplishment. And that one of the things that we found was that HR leaders in the department or at the agency headquarters knew the HCAAF well, and they were integrating it into their thinking, but the further away from headquarters you went, the less the HCAAF was known. The role of the HR professional with regard to the HCAAF needed to be reassessed. And we also got lots of feedback about having a better implementation, rollout, and support of the new HCAAF for the agencies so they could really use this framework effectively. From research, we found 4 really major themes that are there, and I'm sure you're familiar with these from your readings and from attending presentations and all kinds of discussions around strategic human capital. And that is, HR needs to be more of a strategic partner. And in our line of business, we need to focus more on the business and the strategic outcomes and less on activities. A second theme was line managers are responsible for good human capital management, and we are to assist line managers, and that we will more develop or better develop value if we assess on outcomes and not on activities. So you have that same theme running through here, more performance and less activity emphasis. A third theme from academia was employee engagement is really the best means to mission accomplishment. So as we're looking at building the best workforce, do our employees understand the agency strategy? Do employees see the connection between the agency strategy and their own work? And are they proud to tell people where they work? And the last theme that is really very popular now, you see lots of presentations and in conferences, strategic human capital as a decision science. And for us, it's really looking at the emphasis on the strategic impact of different talent pools and how do differences in the quality or availability of different talent pools affect strategic success. So we had a lot of data that came to us, and we had to look at how to pull this all together in a very systematic way, but we couldn't forget that there's also a foundational requirement, and that's the law, the CHICO Act. So any new model must be able to address the 7 bullets that are up there, and these are pulled right from Regulation 250. A new model must be able to address alignment with agency mission goals and objectives. It must help with the integration of budget and strategic plans, facilitate closing skill gaps, provide for continuity of leadership through recruitment, development, and succession plans, lead to a culture that cultivates and develops a high-performing workforce, develop a knowledge management strategy supported by investment, and stress managerial and HR accountability. And I think that you're going to find over time and the next few weeks, as we begin to look at the HCAAF model in detail, that we do address those and we could actually check those off. Okay, so we have all that information we gathered, we know what the law is, and I'd like to say we put it all in a pressure cooker and out came the HCAAF, but it really was a little bit more of a prolonged action that we need to do to come up with this new framework. And so as the new changes emerged, a new model emerged from all of the feedback that we got and putting together some of the academic frameworks, pulling that in, we came up with major changes. And that's what I'm going to concentrate on today. I'm going to give you in a very high level way some of the changes, introduce the new system, and then be with you over the next few weeks as you begin to look at the systems in detail. So what changes do we have? Well, we have a new emphasis, and I think the panel talked about this a little bit. The old HCAAF really is a document some people have called very theoretical. Other people have said, well, agency managers understand it, or executives, but no one else. So this new framework is really concentrating on addressing 3 audiences: the strategic, or your executive level, the operational, and those are your managers, and the employees, so that everyone in the organization can see themselves in this framework. We've simplified the model in a way. We've reduced the system. It's now gone from 5 systems to 4 systems. We still have strategic alignment. We still have talent management, but now subsumed under talent management is leadership and knowledge management, so it's sort of like a super system. We have performance culture and evaluation. Now, performance culture and evaluation have a little asterisk there, because performance culture in the past has been primarily performance management, and I'll talk a little bit about this in detail. But culture is much broader than the management aspect of performance, and so we've really worked hard this time to flesh out performance culture beyond the performance management framework. And evaluation, we've talked in the past about accountability. Accountability is still a very viable concept. But one of the things that we learned from talking to you is that evaluation is a much more graspable, obtainable, accessible concept in terms of looking at how you monitor the work you're doing to see whether or not the outcomes are being reached. In addition to the 4 systems versus the 5, we have new focus areas, and in the past this was called critical skill areas. So let's take a look at these changes in a very brief way, because we'll be addressing these over the next few weeks. But we have three levels of the organization, 3 perspectives. And as I mentioned, strategic is the agency leadership, operational, managers in HR and line positions, and employees. That's everyone. And at every level, for every system, the following will be addressed. So for each one of these perspectives, the following will be addressed. The role of the people involved at that level in terms of connecting strategic human capital management to performance. The responsibilities will be addressed. What outcomes will you be responsible for? What actions in the planning, implementation, evaluation focus? And what tools and resources are available to you if you are in the strategic level of the organization, the operational, or the employee level? And in each upcoming session, we'll talk about each system from each one of these perspectives, looking at these questions I just addressed. So with that, let's start taking a look at the actual framework. We'll start with the employment arc. The employment arc is a concept in federal human capital management that attempts to address each stage of an employee's career, beginning with the development and implementation of effective outreach and hiring. Once an agency succeeded in identifying and hiring talented employees, the next step is to ensure that they are efficiently and effectively integrated into the existing workforce. So the importance of a robust onboarding program can't be overstated in terms of helping new employees feel engaged and involved in the work of the organization right from the start. Providing useful professional development opportunities, as well as constructive and regular performance feedback and recognition, will also further contribute not just to attracting the best employees, but also in keeping them. While, of course, it's necessary to focus on retaining current employees, the reality is that eventually employees are going to retire from the organization. So beyond recruiting, onboarding, and training, a vital portion of the employment arc at the operational level is cultivating a group of strong leaders and knowledgeable employees within the organization, not to just drive performance now, but also to mentor and develop new leaders for the future. At the strategic level, it's also important to develop a strong succession plan, which identifies anticipated skill gaps, position vacancies, not to mention expected or unexpected changes in the organization's mission or budget several years down. So this in turn will drive future workforce planning, which among other things leads right back to outreach and hiring, the beginning of the arc. So you really see this as a continuous process. The first system is the strategic alignment and planning system. And this system ensures agency human capital programs are focused on results and aligned with agency mission, goals, and objectives through analysis, planning, and measurement. And this is the process senior leaders use throughout the life cycle of their planning to link key operational systems and processes to the organization's mission. I think we'll go on to the next one. Evaluation is the system that contributes to agency performance by monitoring and evaluating results of the human capital management strategies, policies, and programs. And evaluation presents an equally critical part of the human capital framework as an agency has a strong strategic plan and has implemented initiatives to develop the workforce, it really needs to understand whether or not what they put in place is working and is it really contributing to the success of the mission. So evaluation, in a sense, is a linchpin for the HCAAF, serving as a pivot point between the planning efforts already in place and those that have yet to be developed. So keep in mind that in addition to being a system, evaluation is also a process, operating continuously at all levels to ensure that an organization is actually reaching the goals that it has set for itself. Now, we've talked a little bit about the GIPRA Modernization Act. The passage of GIPRA further strengthened and institutionalized the importance of using performance information to achieve both federal priority goals and agency-specific priority goals. As agencies prepare for their submissions and their data-driven performance reviews, it's really, really important that they've done a good job in terms of identifying their metrics, identifying processes to monitor whether or not they're making progress toward the goals. So this is a very important part of the HCAAF system. Our next system is the talent management system, and as I mentioned, it's sort of a super system in our new framework. It is defined as a system that promotes a high-performing workforce, encourages and pursues innovation, identifies and closes competency gaps, and implements and maintains programs to attract, acquire, develop, promote, and retain quality and diverse talent. We'll be spending quite a bit of time talking about the talent management system in the next few weeks. But the key for the talent management system is to help us get the right people with the right skills into the right position at the right time so the agency can accomplish its mission. Our performance culture system is defined as developing and inspiring a diverse, innovative, and high-performing workforce by creating, implementing, and maintaining effective performance management strategies and practices. A performance culture refers to the agency's holistic approach to performance, ongoing timely feedback, emphasis on continuous learning, strong employee engagement, inclusion, and appreciation of a diverse workforce. Work-life programs show value for the whole person and are part of this system and give the employees the flexibility to adapt their work environment to better fit their needs. We're looking forward to a panel, I believe it's going to be March 8th, where we'll talk about the performance culture system in depth. And for the first time, we're going to bring to bear in one place, I think, a lively discussion about some of the work-life initiatives like telework and wellness programs, in addition to our performance management system issues. But what are the implications of all this that are going on in an agency? What are the implications for a manager and for an employee as we've instituted strong institution of the telework program? And are wellness programs really useful for people in the agencies, and how are they being taken advantage of? So I think we're really going to have a good discussion on that on the 8th. And last but not least, we're going to take a look at something that we'll talk about when we get to the evaluation system discussion, and that is what is the business process for doing all the work in the that these systems are talking about and encouraging. And the business process provides a structure for developing, tracking, reporting, and improving specific goals, objectives, and action items as they relate to the agency's overarching strategic planning process. So here we have now the basic elements of this new system. We have, of this new framework rather. We have 4 systems that are addressing many of the issues that have been identified in the ARC there in green. We have a process piece, the business process piece, which helps drive the activities and the milestones that are in each one of these systems. And each one of these systems is addressed in a strategic, operational, and employee way. So the next few discussions that we have will be talking about how these systems interrelate to each other. And the interrelation of these systems takes place at the focus areas. So for each one of these systems, we have a set of focus areas that really make up the system. I won't read all of these to you because they will be posted to Max, but I do want to point out to you a few things that you should look for as you're looking at the materials on Max. You'll notice that the current HCAAF has workforce planning under the strategic alignment and planning system, and through lots of feedback from you and from what we're reading in the literature, we move workforce planning into the talent management system, and we'll be talking about that in the upcoming presentation. A couple of other interesting issues for you. Change management is something that we are speaking a lot to that really wasn't talked about much in the current HCAAF. So we have a very nice definition of change management, and that will be part of the discussion also during the performance culture presentation. We had a hard time finding a place for diversity and inclusion because we thought it belonged everywhere. So finally, we did find a place for it. I would like for you guys to take a look at the definition for that as you're reading this on Max, and you'll see where they begin to support some of the other notions that we've identified here. Now, part of looking at the interrelationship between the systems is to see how the focus areas relate to each other. And we are going to be looking primarily at the relationship between these systems from a talent management perspective, and you probably can guess why we would do that. So on the slide in front of you now, we're going to be pulling up some things, and what we've done is highlighted where the interrelationships are between the systems in terms of the focus areas. So the focus areas that are in black are related to each other, and in upcoming presentations we'll talk about how workforce planning in the talent management area is supported through the focus areas in strategic planning and alignment. You see the three focus areas under strategic planning and alignment. In talent management, we'll talk about how these focus areas are related to the focus areas in strategic alignment and performance culture. And part of the presentations, you'll have a good sense of how these relate as we talk about certain initiatives and talk about how we want to look at these systems from the three perspectives: strategic, operational, and the employee. I think we have one more click here. Right, retention and knowledge management. And then we will have, yes, okay, good, thank you. You can see the relationship there. And you can get a jump on this discussion by looking at what we have on Max and using this color coordination to help you make some of the linkages yourself. And finally, but certainly not least, we have evaluation, and we'll be talking about evaluation from several standpoints. We'll be talking about those systems that need to be in place to help us know whether or not our initiatives are successful. Are they supporting agency mission? Are they supporting performance? But we'll also be talking about some big data practices and some of the measurement issues, more general measurement issues around big data in our evaluation presentation, which I believe is at the end of February. So where are we going? Essentially, we have more work to do, and we'll be coming back to you. We are developing our tools now that are supporting each one of these systems. We will be coming to you to provide your expertise as subject matter experts. And we will continue the rolling out of, or the education, so to speak, on the system with a little bit more depth. So February 15th, we have a presentation on strategic planning and alignment. On February 22nd, we have a presentation on talent management. March 8th, our performance culture panel. And on March 22nd, our evaluation discussion. So in a nutshell now, that's where we are in terms of the new model. I hope this kind of whetted your appetite for more discussion, because we're ready to provide it. And so if there are any questions in the audience or on the speaker, let me first mention this before we go to our questions. I kept mentioning the MAX site. Here's the MAX site information. We'll be posting documents after each presentation. And there'll be a little bit more there than just the presentations. There'll be some other goodies there that I think you might find interesting. So if there are any questions, either on the line or in the audience, we're willing to address them. If you have specific questions that you think might be better served in the other sessions as we go into more detail about the systems, write them down or send them in to us, and we'll make sure to address them in those particular sessions. So with that, let me open it up to everyone else.
Thank you, Shelley. We do have a couple of questions that we received from our online audience, and time won't allow us to get into maybe more than one or two of them, but I'll ask the first one, and then you can provide our answer. Will the new emerging human capital framework address the need for our human capital management to be done with regard to sound sustainability practices? And I'll repeat that question. Will the new or emerging human capital framework address the need for our human capital management to be done with regard to sound sustainability practices?
Well, I'm not quite sure what they mean about sustainability. To some of us who are into the green world, that would mean something a little different. But if you're in terms of, is this here to stay, and will it help us provide a systematic way of providing real outcomes, I think this will probably be a very good start for that.
Great. And one last question. Will the HCAAF specifically address how to identify the appropriate staff needed, particularly during emergency contingencies such as hurricane events, those types of things?
Well, I think that people will be pleased to see that we have a section, a well-fleshed out section, that's my favorite phrase, well-fleshed out, section on workforce planning that will help address something like that. So while we're not having specific events mentioned in the HCAAF verbiage, we will provide you with a process that would allow you to address those particular staffing issues regardless of the emergency situation. Okay, I think we're at 2 o'clock. It's been fun. I hope you'll join us again. As I mentioned, the next presentation is, I've lost my page here. Can you click back one for us? Oh, you have the clicker. Okay, our next presentation is February 15th, and we'll be sending out some information, so please join us then. And thank you very much, and have fun in the snow.